All right, we start with breaking news, and sources have told Al Jazeera that Hamas has agreed to a U.S. proposal for a ceasefire in Gaza. It's understood that the group and U.S. Special Envoy Steve Witkoff agreed to the draft deal at a meeting in Qatar's capital of Doha. Sources tell us it includes a 60-day ceasefire and the release of 10 captives alive in 2 stages. The U.S. president will guarantee the terms of the deal and the withdrawal of Israeli troops. Sources also tell us it would guarantee unconditional humanitarian aid from day one. The American envoy is said to have sent the draft to the Israeli government and is waiting for a response. We've got correspondents across these developments in Washington, D.C. and in Gaza. But first, let's cross to Hamda Salut, who's in Amman, and she's there because the Israeli government has banned Al Jazeera from reporting inside Israel and indeed the occupied West Bank. So tell us, Hamda, if you would, if you have any reaction yet from Israel on this.
Well, we have had some reaction from the Israelis, but it's all anonymous officials speaking to media saying that these reports are untrue, that Israel has not agreed to anything, neither has Hamas, but rather that these negotiations are still ongoing. And the Israelis have noted that anything Hamas has put on the table has been unacceptable to the Israelis. But it's worth mentioning the comments of Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu in the most recent week, who has added new conditions for an end of the war. According to the sources who have spoken to Al Jazeera, they say that while this truce would be temporary, there would be talks ongoing for a permanent end of the ceasefire, with the Americans guaranteeing Israel's seat at the table. However, Netanyahu had outlined previously what his conditions would be for an end to the war. It's not only the release of the captives, but Hamas would also have to lay down its arms. Their leaders politically and militarily would have to be exiled. But he also noted that he wants Trump's plan for Gaza that was previously condemned. Many said it amounted to ethnic cleansing. He wants the expulsion of the Palestinian population from Gaza. Netanyahu said that that's one of his conditions for ending the war. Now let's talk about what Hamas has previously said. They have said throughout the beginning of this year, since that ceasefire deal came into place back in January, saying that they would be willing to release all of the remaining Israeli captives in exchange for an end to the war, something that the Israelis have repeatedly rejected. But the family members of Israeli captives have long called on their government to take that deal, to take an end to the war, because it would mean the release of the remaining hostages. But Israeli officials have been publicly saying the quiet part out loud, that the captives are not their main priority right now. That coming from members of the far right like Bezalel Smotrich, who holds a pretty high-ranking position within the Israeli government. So you have Israeli officials saying one thing, saying that they want to continue the war, that they want this absolute victory. The Israeli prime minister even appointing a new security chief, head of the Shin Bet, who was quoted saying that he wants an absolute victory, that the captives, while they are a priority, it's not the main one for the Israelis, that they have a lot of work to do militarily, even at the cost of the Palestinian people who are being killed in Gaza, and even at the cost of the captives who are still being held in the Palestinian territory.
Hamda, Israel, it seems, not involved in these negotiations. What does that say about these increasing tensions between the US and Israel?
Well, this would be the third time that the Americans have directly negotiated with Hamas just this year. And the first time it happened back several months ago, it was the first time in 30 years. And the Israelis were incredibly frustrated, very angry that they weren't in the loop, very angry that they weren't even notified of the negotiations that were happening behind the scenes. But the Americans hit back, saying that they didn't need anyone's permission to negotiate when it came to the lives of Americans who were being held captive. And that's what we saw just a few weeks ago when the dual national Israeli-American soldier Idan Alexander was released because of these direct negotiations between the Americans and Hamas. So Israel felt a little bit blindsided because they were out of the loop. They weren't part of those negotiations, but surely, of course, welcomed the release. And it caused a lot of stir in Israel that how could the Americans bring about the release of the captive, that they were negotiating behind the scenes, and that they wanted the Americans to negotiate on the rest of their behalf. have, saying that they still have loved ones being held in Gaza, and perhaps the Americans could help with that, because clearly the Israeli government was failing them. It's something these family members have been accusing Netanyahu and his political allies of doing, of being the main roadblock to any sort of deal, saying that he's prolonging this war for his own personal and political gain. So at this hour, look, still, Israeli officials are denying reports of any sort of movement of a ceasefire deal, but they're saying negotiations are still ongoing, but they're saying that any agreement is still not on the table for them.
All right, Hamda, thanks for that. More from you as we get further developments. That's the picture from Amman for the time being. Let's cross to Washington, D.C. Our White House correspondent, Kimberly Halkett, is standing by. So, Kimberly, I think we could be hearing from President Trump on Memorial Day shortly, and I guess we'll be listening keenly to see if he has anything to say about this.
Yeah, the U.S. president striking an optimistic tone on Sunday about the possibility of good news with regard to Israel's war on Gaza, presumably some sort of halt to the conflict on Sunday. But as of right now, Nick, there has been no confirmation of the news that is coming out of the Middle East region. In fact, the U.S. president has been largely silent on this issue on Monday. It is a federal holiday here in the United States. As you point out, the U.S. president set to give remarks at Arlington National Cemetery very shortly, where we expect, in addition to laying a wreath at the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier, he will be speaking there from the amphitheater. Now, he has made a social media post on his social media platform. He did talk about it being Memorial Day. Typically, this is when presidents will talk about the sacrifice that soldiers have made in past conflicts. The U.S. president doing a little of that, but also railing at his political enemies with regard to domestic issues like immigration and the unhappiness with some of the rulings of judges in recent days. But with regard to the issue of Israel's war in Gaza, we have still not heard from the U.S. president. So as you point out, we are watching very carefully. But again, on Sunday, there's no question the U.S. president did hint there was some optimism looming, saying that, of course, the U.S. has opened the communications for this. He said he wants to see an end to the war in Gaza as quickly as possible. The United States wants to see if it can be stopped.
All right, Kimberly, thanks for that update there. Kimberly Halkett, they're reporting from the White House. Let's cross to central Gaza, to Dore and Hind Quduri joins us from there. And so, Hind, of course, for the thousands, hundreds of thousands of people in Gaza, any ceasefire can't come soon enough.
Definitely, especially after the latest evacuation order in the southern parts of the Gaza Strip. Palestinians are very desperate, Nick, to any type of ceasefire. They just want to have a deep breath without airstrikes, without drones, without artillery shelling. And also the fact that the blockade that has been imposed on the Gaza Strip since the war resumed, we're talking about more than 10 weeks where Palestinians are unable to even walk. They're walking with their headaches. They can't even feed their families. And the situation, especially the food situation, is making the situation way worse on Palestinians. And this was the hardest period and the hardest blockade that has been imposed on the Palestinians from the Israeli authorities since the war began. But Palestinians now are saying, does a ceasefire mean that there is going to be a withdrawal? Does that mean that more food is going to come in? And Palestinians are very, very desperate for the fact that any ceasefire negotiation deal will reach an agreement. We're also talking about weeks since the war resumed in March. Palestinians have been targeted in schools and shelters, and there has been more Palestinians squeezed into lands. We're talking about Palestinians in Rafah and Khan Yunis squeezed into Mawasi, Khan Yunis, and we're also talking about Palestinians in Beit Lahia, Jabalia, Beit Hanun squeezed into the western parts of the Gaza city, where Palestinians are literally suffocating from the lack of food, lack of medicine, and also the lack of safety, where there has been zero safety across the Gaza Strip from the south to the north. We're talking to Palestinians and they're saying, we hope this deal reaches an agreement. We hope we're going to have a breath and we're going to have some calm moments where Palestinians still have their beloved ones trapped under the rubble. people, they are deprived from visiting their houses, and also the fact that Palestinians are waiting for the reconstruction and also for the Rafah crossing to open. There's a lot of hopes for every Palestinian and Palestinian family, and the ceasefire deal is more of every Palestinian dream living in the Gaza Strip right now.
Indeed. We'll leave it there for now, Hind, but do appreciate your reporting there from Dore. Thank you. Let's speak now to Ori Goldberg, who's an Israeli political commentator, joins us now from Tel Aviv. So, Ori, we have this agreement between the US and Hamas. The other critical part of this, of course, the other part of the triangle is Israel. What do you think is likely to come from the administration?
I think there's a good chance that after 24 hours, give or take, of denials and protests, Israel will find a way to accede to the deal, because the truth is Israel has absolutely nowhere to go but to continue to kill Palestinians in the numbers we've seen over the past few weeks.
Okay, so let me just get that clear. So you think that that's a bit of obfuscation, but then Israel will agree to the terms of the deal?
I think there's a good chance that Israel will. I've been wrong over the past 2 years, thinking that Israel will see the sense in agreeing to a deal once or twice. I don't remember how many times. But I think right now, really, Israel is absolutely at the end of its military, strategic, political rope. And also, I think Israel is beginning to feel the international tide turning. Israel no longer enjoys the impunity and the gross international support that it has enjoyed so far.
The thing is, Benjamin Netanyahu, Israel's prime minister, laid out more red lines just a few days ago, didn't he? Saying that Hamas must lay down their arms before they would agree to a deal. Indeed, Hamas must leave the strip altogether and Palestinians must leave the strip altogether.
Well, as you can see, in reality, nobody places much stock in what Israel's prime minister says. He can lay down as many red lines as he wants, and if he shows, I think, any sign or willingness to cooperate, he may be given a more graceful or elegant way of climbing down from his high horse. But Israel is not a part of what is happening in the Middle East at the moment, not as far as the United States is concerned, and certainly not as far as other Middle Eastern and international players are concerned.
So where will the pressure be coming from within his administration for Benjamin Netanyahu to agree to this? It's certainly not from those of the far right.
I don't think any pressure that may come from inside Israel will be effective, not from the families of the captives, not from the far right. Well, obviously they wouldn't approve of this deal. I think the only effective pressure, the only sort of pressure under which Netanyahu might buckle, is pressure from the outside. And the reason I am cautiously optimistic now is because I think that pressure is beginning to accumulate.
Okay, and how is that pressure manifesting itself? Sorry to press you on this point. How do you think the pressure is manifesting itself, and from whom? The United States, I presume you're saying?
I think that's a very good question. It's not just the United States. It's things that may seem minor to people who don't live in Israel, but it is the EU Commissioner for Sports who says it's time to examine Israel's participation in European sporting events. It is the boycott against Israeli scholars and Israeli investors that is growing more and more on a daily basis. I think Israelis are now beginning to understand that this is actually happening, and so is Benjamin Netanyahu. I don't think, again, that the pressure from the United States is that focused. I think Trump, if I may be allowed to make some kind of personal analysis, I think Trump looks at Netanyahu and sees a loser. Because Netanyahu has not managed to accomplish even a single goal he has set out to accomplish. And if there's one thing Trump does not like, it's losers around him. So Trump has made it clear that he is operating at a distance from Netanyahu, and I believe that is enough pressure for Netanyahu to ultimately buckle.
Trump may think he's a loser, but Netanyahu is certainly a political survivor. What do you think this would do to his political career if he does accede to this ceasefire?
I think you have to remember that Israeli politics in general, even though Israelis are vigorously denying it and reality itself, Israeli politics is occurring now under the shadow of a genocide. So whatever happens, no scenarios are far-fetched. Anything can happen. it's quite likely that Netanyahu will accept a deal and will ultimately bring the IDF to withdraw from the Gaza Strip and still manage to hold on to power until properly scheduled elections in 2026. Nothing seems extreme in this situation, but then again, nothing sticks either. Nothing Israeli politicians do seems to make a difference. They haven't defeated Hamas, they haven't destroyed Hamas, they haven't released the captives. The only thing they are doing consistently is destroying the Gaza Strip and killing its inhabitants. And that, I think, we will see that beginning to stop soon, because I think the international community has had enough. No trust is to be placed in Israelis. This is all about pressure coming in from the outside.
All right, Dore, we'll leave it there for the time being. Thanks very much indeed for that analysis. We appreciate that. Thank you.
Make sure to subscribe to our channel to get latest news from Al Jazeera.
الأولاد ما بينفعش نودعهم أصلاً، متفاهمين؟ حرقين الأولاد حرق. الأولاد من عمر 12 شهر 12 سنة ل 6 شهور حرق سواد. أنا ما كنتش قادرة أشوفهم، حتى كلهم كانوا بأكياس مسكر عليهم ومنعنا حتى إن إحنا نودعهم. يعني مش عارفين ركان من جبران من إيف، مش عارفين ولا طفل من الأطفال. مين هدول أصلاً؟ أرزاق يعني. منهم اللي راسه مش موجودة أصلاً، منهم اللي مقطعين الأولاد. خلوا حمدي معه 10 أطفال، مرته الدكتورة آلاء أمين النجار. خلوا حمدي هو حد ما له بأي تنظيم سياسي، ما له بالمقاومة، ما له بحماس، ما له بأي بأي جهة من الجهات. حد مسالم جدا، بيشهد كل الناس بأخلاقه، بأدبه، بعمله الوطني، بعمله بمجال الطب. دائما بسميه بطاقة الإنقاذ لإلنا. الدكتورة آلاء حد مؤمن بالله، صابر ومحتسب، مؤمنة، بتحسب كل هذا عند ربنا. كنا في البيت فجأة سمعنا صوت صاروخ نزل، ما انفجر. احنا فكرنا خلص علينا، يعني احنا بنستنى برد الصليب انه يجينا ان احنا يعمل لنا ممر امن مشان خلص نطلع. بعد هيك صار الصاروخ صار اكبر، الضربه صارت اكثر، صرنا مش شايفين بعض من كثر الدخنه ما صارت علينا. حكينا بابا خلو حمدي، ما عرفتش، مش عارفه درسيده، صار في درسيده شيء. كنا يدوب مكلمينه، وكان حكى لماما انه هيني موجود وبخبز الاولاد. يعني كان الوضع الحمد لله، يعني صح كان الكوارتر بتلفلف وبتطخطخ من كل حته، وحتى مش عارفين نطلع. يعني بيحكوا لنا اطلعوا، حاولوا تحطوا رايه بيضاء، بس احنا مش عارفين نطلع بسبب انه الكوارتر بتطخطخ من كل حته. لا بتفرق بين انه هذا حد طفل، هذا مقاوم، هاي بنت صبيه ما لهاش علاقه بشيء، هذا راجل جاي بس بده ياخذ اكل غرض لاولاده بس بدهم ياكلوا ويشربوا، منهم ما لهاش علاقه، بتطخطخوا بس. شهداء مرميين في الشارع ما لهمش علاقه. بابا حكى لنا بسرعه الدفاع المدني والهلال او الهلال الاحمر، يا بابا استناكم عند درسيتكم وعند خالكم حمدي. احنا خلص مطمنين، احنا مكلمين خالو حمدي ما لناش شيء مكلمينه يعني، فبس حطوا رايه بيضاء ويلا يا بابا نطلع. حكينا مش حنطلع الا عمو حماده يكون معنا، فحكى هي حماده ورايا. هو كان بابا ساعتها بيضحك علينا. طلعنا واحنا ماشيين، في صوت البارود، ريحه البارود كثير قويه، الحجاره مرميه، عمدان الكهرباء، سلوك الكهرباء، شيء يعني كانه زلزال في المنطقه. نصح صار اكثر من ضربه غير ضربه خالو حمدي هذه، مش عارفين الضرب هذا وين، البيت وين انقصف، مش عارفين ايش بصير اصلا حوالينا. وصوت الدب، كل دبه بتصير قلبي بروح معها. واحنا ماشيين الا صوت درسيد، وفيش درسيد لإلي. طب وين خالو حمدي؟ طب وين اولاده؟ خالو علي حكانا خالو هي خالكم حمدي في المستشفى، هو بخير واولاده بخير. مشينا وخالو علي كان بخاطر، وكان على اخر شارع اسامه، والكوارتر صارت تخطخ علينا، واحنا بنجري وماسكين الرايه البيضاء ومش عارفين شو اللي بنعمله احنا. وصلنا للسياره والكوارتر صارت تخطخ اكثر، لدرجه العجل تبع خالو علي تبع السياره كان مبنشر. وصرنا نمشي بالسياره والسياره مبنشره اصلا، مش عارفين كيف وصلنا المستشفى. لحقوا انه اولاد خالو حمدي مستشهدين كلهم ال10، بس ضل منهم ادم. طيب وخالو حمدي حالته كثير خطيره. طب كيف؟ خالو حمدي بخير؟ لا، خالو حمدي كثير خطيره حالته، اولاده كلهم مستشهدين. الاولاد ما بينفعش نودعهم اصلا، متفاهمين؟ حرقين الاولاد حرق. الاولاد من عمر 12 شهر 12 سنه ل 6 شهور حرق سواد. انا ما كنتش قادره اشوفهم، حتى كلهم كانوا بأكياس مسكر عليهم ومنعنا حتى ان احنا نودعهم. يعني مش عارفين ركان من جبران من إيف، مش عارفين ولا طفل من الأطفال. مين هدول أصلا؟ أرزاق يعني. منهم اللي راسه مش موجودة أصلا، منهم اللي مقطعين الأولاد. طيب إيش اللي صار؟ حكوا لنا إنه أول حاجة ضربوا الصاروخ اللي أنتم ما سمعتوهوش وما انفجرش. قالوا حمدي راح بده ياخذ الأولاد ينقذهم، راحوا ضربوا الصاروخ الثاني. البيت مش إنه البيت مثلا ضاربين دور يعني، والله بيت السنوار، بيت حد من تعيين القوائد، تعيين حماس، بيته مش مضروب زي هيك، بيت خلوا حد في الأرض، في الأرض بدرسيدو، بيتهم في الأرض. ذكرياتي بدرسيدو، ذكرياتي بدرسيدو، ذكرياتي مع سيدي، ذكرياتي مع إخوالي، لمتنا، جمعتنا، كلها راحت. كيف هن عليهم؟ طب انتوا ما كنتوا عارفين في البدروم في أطفال ومتأكدين في أطفال، الحمد لله شهرين في البدروم وعارفين إنه في أطفال وعارفين أعمارهم، ما كنتوش عارفين في أطفال تضربوهم الضربة هذه؟ طب عملوهم صاروخ إنذار، احكوا إنه إحنا نضربكم صاروخ إنذار إنه اطلعوا. طيب لو انتوا نيتكم منيحة روحوا تضربوا صاروخ ثاني تضربوا البيت كله هيك، كيف هن عليهم؟ أحمد آدم هالبيت هو منيح، حالته مستقرة، خلو حمدي حالته كتير حرجة وحالته كتير خطيرة، والعاشر 9 من إخواته راحوا، هم مش 7 اللي استشهدوا، هم 7 ولا وجدوهم، وجدوا جثثهم، لكن 2 مفقودين.
What won't come off? You don't understand, I keep trying with soap. What won't come off? The blood off my hands. And look, she's laughing. An IDF soldier admitting that I killed a boy. Now we just laugh about it. Israeli society turns people into sociopaths so they can execute children without empathy. You want to hear it? Sure.
She must do Sam Harris meditations.
She must. Breathe in. Yeah, Tim Dillon just did this.
I texted him the old story from when we had that Buddhist guy, because I think at that point you didn't know Buddhism was also violent, like all the others. That's what Buddhism was for, so you could remain calm.
Oh, right. You remember that?
Yeah, right.
He would teach the IDF soldiers how to meditate and remain calm when they were shooting someone in the head.
Not waste ammo.
Don't waste ammo.
Yeah.
So let's hear what this IDF soldier. She looks nice. Let's hear what she says. I say I killed a boy. This is from an Israeli documentary film, To See If I'm Smiling. This is from 2007. This is on YouTube already. I don't even say the army. Only that. See, look at her smiling. This is weird. Do you think about it? Do you think about that you killed a boy?
That's a mask.
It's hard to think about it now.
Yeah.
At the time, I would think about it a lot. Now we just laugh about it. As much as one can. Now it's just there like a part of me. I killed a boy.
I don't think
She means a
laughing.
child.
I think that's somebody
That's what she means, a child.
Look at that
Hang
stare.
on, Kurt, we have your mic low because of this. I would go home on leave, and I would call my girlfriend in the army. Sivan, it's not coming off. What won't come off? You don't understand, I keep trying with soap. What won't come off? The blood off my hands. And look, she's laughing. I have blood on my hands. I don't know what to do. Whoa!
She's not laughing. She's not laughing about it. That's somebody that's traumatized by what they did. That's a complete mask. It looks like watching young kids in gangs. That's what it looked like to me. She goes, I can't wash the blood off my hands. She's not laughing. She's laughing because she killed someone, and that's a trauma. It's brutal what they do. Everybody's drafted. That's why they had to do the Buddhist meditation. That girl is traumatized. That laugh is not the laugh of someone that is enjoying themselves. It is not.
Well, she said she's telling the story as she's laughing. It's incongruent that she's telling a story about telling her girlfriend, I can't wash the blood off my hands, as she's laughing about it. Because
you could see what's behind that immediately.
Yeah.
They force people into the IDF. That's not good for anybody there. And I do not take that laugh as a genuine laugh at all. I don't think a dime store psychologist could see that was a mask for the deep pain of killing a boy because that's a young girl. Anybody could see that unless they don't want to see it. I could see it immediately. 1,000-yard stare. But what do you think our troops do when they come home? Not that? A cynical laugh after what they just did for the country? That's what all the soldiers do. They're in pain because it's unnatural to make people do that.
And that's why the suicide rate is so high with the veterans. I saw a guy talking about his troop in Afghanistan. 3 of them got killed in Afghanistan, and 17 committed suicide when they came home.
Yeah, that's suicide voice that girl has, but hopefully the Zionist programming is strong enough to not take your own life because they can't lose population.
Wow.
We think military is you take kids and you make them killers. And then the people that were their enemy that maimed them go on to rule Syria and shake hands with Macron. That's how that works.
That's how that works. It's a sicker world than you could think. The world is sicker than you think. And our country is, they call it late stage capitalism. And what they mean is that the whole country, I've been saying this now for years, that the country isn't a little corrupt. It's 100% corrupt. Meaning that right now, you can't fly into Newark Airport because they don't have enough air traffic controllers. They had to cancel thousands of flights. It's not safe to fly in there right now. Did you know this? Did you hear about this, Kurt? Yeah. So 20% of the air traffic controllers walked off the job. It's not some kind of work stoppage or some union movement. They all, you know what they did? They claimed trauma because a month ago, all their screens went blank. And for 90 seconds, and they didn't know where any of the planes were that they were talking to. They didn't know what was going on. And they were all so traumatized by this that they're now, just because there's a clause in their contract saying if you are physically or emotionally traumatized, you can take time off. And so 20% of the air traffic controllers that handled Newark Airport have walked off the job claiming trauma. And why did that happen? Because we're using equipment that is way out of date. In fact, it was a copper wire burned. We're using copper wire, not fiber optics. That's how old this is. Russell Dobular talks about how the switches for the subway in New York City are 100 years old. So this is how all empires end. We're not investing in our own country. Like when we had those deals with China, right? So we outsourced all our jobs to China, and China sent us cheap goods. And both sides made a lot of money. China said that. Well, both sides made a lot of money, which we did. A lot of money was made in China. A lot of money was made in the United States. The difference is in China, they put that money into their infrastructure. And now their country looks like it's in the 23rd century. In our country, we don't have high-speed rail. We were using 100-year-old switchers for our subway. We don't have infrastructure. Our roads are crumbling, and our air travel is not safe. The second busiest airport in New York City has basically shut down because we did. By the way, Doge fired. They didn't fire air traffic controllers, but they fired the maintenance crew, the technical. They would fix the machines if you're not going to replace the machines with up-to-date machines for air traffic control, you can't fire. Well, you can. They did. They fired the people who are supposed to keep those old machines running. And so then those old machines broke down, created trauma in 20%. So this is what's called. So when I talk
Jimmy,
about,
don't forget the people that didn't want to take the jab, that had worked there for years, that knew how to work the old machines.
Yeah, they had to get
air
fired.
Traffic control.
That's right.
They all got fired. Much reason the police suck here now. All the qualified people got run out and replaced
with firemen.
Yep.
Yeah.
With idiots. Like patronage, like mafia jobs, where you put the guy who can't speak English in charge of like water. That's what they did. And then those people doing maintenance, those aren't the new Zoomer employees because they know how to fix things.
So so I don't know how I get off on this. Because we're so corrupt. Our whole Western world is corrupt.
Yeah, I call it Western civilization, not that's what the problem. Western civilization.
Western civilization. We're always supposed. Remember how Sam Harris and Bill Maher would talk about how we're better than them. Our society's better. Our society's crumbling, and it's exactly how Karl Marx predicted. Karl Marx didn't have a prescription on how to fix capitalism. People get that wrong. Karl Marx, all he did was outline and describe what's wrong with capitalism, and he said capitalism eats itself and it becomes correct. And that's exactly what's happened. So we have like 3 companies that own everything. It's very close to what communism is. It's almost the exact same thing. You have the illusion of choice. You don't have competition anymore. You have 3 companies that own everything. BlackRock, Vanguard, and State Street. They own everything.
I'm sure
Right
it's
now,
not
you know why we don't have fire trucks in not only California, but in like places like Atlanta and Philadelphia? It's because places like BlackRock and Vanguard have bought up the manufacturing of fire trucks. So now we don't have enough fire trucks. So we're not investing in our own country. That's what I'm talking about, how our own country, it's called end stage capitalism. And this is it. Marx predicted it. It eats itself. And so what you do is you loot. They're looting instead of investing. China is investing. The communists are actually investing in their country. They have health care. They have high-speed rail. They have beautiful cities. Their cops don't even carry guns, do they? You were there, Kurt. Do their cops carry guns in China? I don't think so.
No one respects their cops at all. I mean, theirs is kind of an extreme where their cops are like, literally, we ran away 1 block, and they're not coming to get you.
Yeah, but they have...
You have to worry about the Ministry of something, Interior or something. They got Uzis, those guys, but they don't come unless you really piss them off.
So that's when I say, I'm all for capitalism and I'm all for competition. I'm also for strong unions. And not that doesn't mean unions don't have problems, but you don't throw the baby out with the bathwater.
If you're not throwing capitalism out just because it's
we don't throw capitalism out because it forces us to take
power.
Because it forces us to take emergency mandated experimental medical treatments. That's what capitalism did. And now the capitalists own the government. When they go to have a meeting in Congress, when they have a session of Congress, they're not doing the biddings of students or workers or average citizens or the elderly or the retired or any. They're doing the bidding of the capitalists, the 3 companies that own everybody. And that's why everything's screwed up. That's why half the country can't afford a $500 emergency. That's why people go bankrupt when they get sick. That's why they had to shut down the 2nd biggest airport in the country in New York. The 2nd biggest airport in New York. Because we're not investing.
Hey, here's an idea. What if, with precious, sacred, nothing better than it, capitalism, you just do something to keep it from degenerating into a private equity free-for-all?
That's what this is.
Where they take everything.
That's exactly.
Is there any way to stop it, or do you just have to let that happen?
No,
because if you let it happen, that's what Marx said would happen.
That's exactly what Marx said would happen is happening. And we're hollowing out. We've already hollowed out the middle class. We've exported all our jobs. But we didn't take any of that money we made doing that and invested in our country. China did. The communists.
The ones with the flying cars now.
The ones with the flying cars. And I know this is hard.
You want to talk about freedom?
I know
they're going to let Chinese people drive flying cars. Talk about crazy freedom.
The idea that we're the greatest country in the world. No, we spend the most on our military. We're not the greatest country in the world. Our people go bankrupt when they get sick. Our people go bankrupt when they have to go get educated. They're mountains of debt. People can't afford, Generation Z can't afford houses.
We lose every war.
We lost every war in my lifetime.
How about the debt that they're building on college students? Right? How much debt are college students?
Yeah, that's what I said.
Forever.
When you go get educated, you're saddled with debt for the rest of your life.
Because the military wants there to be a lot of inspiration to join the military.
That's right.
We covered that. They go, please do not forgive student debt. We need that as an incentive because we're not making our quotas.
That's right.
Kill yourself in a Ukraine-esque debacle.
Come see us live in Los Angeles, Buffalo, Toledo, Montreal, Ottawa, Glasgow, Manchester, Belfast, Dublin, London, Liverpool, Birmingham. Go to jimmydore.com for a link for tickets.
war crimes committed by Israel on the Palestinian people in the Gaza Strip and in the West Bank. We're here to say we refuse the bombing of civilians, we refuse starvation, we refuse war crime, we refuse the genocide and ethnic cleansing of Palestinians. We will not be silent when our government and our people are committing such hideous crimes against humanity, against human beings. And we're here to raise our voices as long as we can in this growing fascist regime.
People are shouting, stop the war. The police here are suppressing the demonstration, but like the other demonstrators are shouting, we're going to keep on protesting this. We're not going to acquiesce. We're not going to accept this terrible act that is happening supposedly in our name as Israeli citizens. We do not accept what the Israeli government is doing. We do not accept the legitimacy of these attacks.
فجأة صحيت ما لقيت إلا هيك كل جسمي تحت الردم بس راسي برا ابني تحت الردم ابني الصغير عمره 1.5 سنة وزوجي تحت الردم أولادنا كلهم أطفالنا تحت الردم ما عرفتش أقول مين ولا مين والدم فوقينا ما بنعرف مين أشلاء شهداء إحنا بنعرفهم مش مين ردم وقصف وخوف ويعني إحنا نازحين على مدرسة على مكان تقوينا عشان نكون محميين نيجي نلاقي حالنا حتى لا أمان في بيوتنا ولا أمان في أرضنا ولا أمان في مدرستنا ولا أمان في مكان يقوينا وين نروح إحنا؟
Times of India videos, your daily dose of India and the world. Global news, different views, and sharp analysis.
Pressure of expectation from your fans, your supporters.
That is often served as a backdrop for several Bollywood.
You're not a brute majority anymore. If you individually take out data.
Making sense of global conflicts. Tracking the new emerging world order.
Strike on Israeli military bases.
A multi-pronged.
To stay out of harm's way as Israel started bombing targets across.
Understanding changing alliances in a polarized world. Tune into TOI videos for all this and more. Click on the bell icon to subscribe and never miss an update.
Mohammed Al-Bukhaiti, welcome back to the Greyzone.
Thank you.
U.S. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth says the U.S. military is attacking Yemeni territory controlled by Ansar Allah more deeply, more harshly than ever, and that the U.S. attacks will not stop until you are defeated. How much damage have the U.S. attacks actually done to Ansar Allah's military infrastructure? And how do you assess the effectiveness of the U.S. military campaign?
In the name of God, the Almighty, the United States has not succeeded in halting our military operations in support of Gaza. Our naval blockade against the Zionist entity remains firmly in place. In response, the U.S. has begun targeting civilian infrastructure and expanding its strikes to include areas already devastated since the 2015 war. But we are no strangers to this. American attacks have not deterred us. We have maintained the blockade in the Red Sea and extended our military reach deep into the Zionist entity. For 10 years, we have lived under American strikes. We have endured, we have adapted. American bombs, American jets, and American weapons are nothing new to us.
This week, the U.S. military attacked the Ras Isa port, killing scores of port workers and injuring many more. How does the attack on this civilian port, a fuel port, impact the lives of average Yemenis? And what do you think targeting the port says about the U.S. strategy in Yemen?
At the onset of the U.S. military campaign in Yemen, American officials claimed they were not targeting the Yemeni people, but rather the Ansarullah movement and its military capabilities. Yet just 2 days ago, the United States launched a strike on the civilian port of Ras Al Isa, completely destroying it and incinerating dozens of oil tankers owned by the people of Yemen. This reckless assault killed over 100 workers and tanker crew members and left hundreds more injured. This act lays bare the falsehoods of the American administration. It is now undeniable that they are deliberately targeting civilian infrastructure and Yemeni civilians. These actions reveal the criminal intent behind U.S. operations, not to defend peace, but to shield those carrying out genocide in Gaza, and to silence those in Yemen who dare to resist it.
The U.S. military has sent a second aircraft carrier into the immediate region, the USS Carl Vinson. With this aircraft carrier stationed in southeastern Yemen, away from the areas of the Red Sea where drones are being fired and the blockade is being enacted, U.S. bombing is focusing on the defensive lines in the eastern areas around Marib, away from the Red Sea. Is this all a sign of an impending ground invasion by your enemies with U.S. air cover? And if so, is Ansarullah ready for such a confrontation?
The U.S. is amassing carriers and warships in the region in order to break the will of the Yemeni people. But we are committed to continuing our military operations in support of Gaza. We will continue that no matter the price. We are also sure that this American operation will fail, just like the Prosperity Guardian operation failed, and just like the Saudi American-led Decisive Storm operation failed in 2015. This U.S. military failure leads it to target civilians and civilian infrastructure, and now it is resorting to a potential ground war. We are sure that no American troops will be deployed on the ground to fight in Yemen, yet that's why they are inciting regional and domestic groups against us. They are moving the Saudis and the Emiratis additionally to their mercenaries in Yemen to do the dirty work of a ground invasion for them. Further signs of this impending invasion is the fact that the U.S. strikes have targeted eastern Yemeni positions that are far from the Red Sea. Yet, let me assuage the fears of the free peoples of the world. We are ready for the battle, even if we have to wage it on 3 fronts, whether they be internally, regionally, or internationally. We are preparing for these new fronts because we are confident that the U.S. will fail in its direct military operations, which will lead it to other options, whether these options include the targeting of Yemeni civilians, or, when they've tried that, to throw the Saudi and Emiratis into Yemen, or to move their mercenaries in Yemen. All these options of a ground invasion will be supported by US air support, of course. Let me also add that if the US moves their mercenaries, it will not play out according to their plan. The Yemeni people will not appreciate this, and they will mobilize to destroy those playing defense for the Zionist entity. After all, the Yemeni people are eager to fight the Israelis more directly in order to support their people in Gaza. So using these options of different fronts won't help the Americans achieve any of their goals. They will only lose their tools in the region.
تمكن أمريكا من تحقيق أهدافها بل أنها ستخسر أدواتها في الإقليم وفي الداخل اليمني.
This week we saw Saudi Arabia's leadership meet with Iranian General Mohammad Bagheri to discuss cooperation in reducing tensions between these historic enemies. Do you think the Saudis would support a ground invasion against Ansar Allah? Would the Emiratis? And who would be fighting on the ground against you? What forces would the U.S. send in as its proxies?
There is an American desire to get the Saudi, Emirati, and Yemeni mercenaries thrown against us. And of course, there is a desire for the Saudi and the UAE to join the US in this invasion of Yemen. Yet there is also lots of hesitation. The US is hesitant because it fears losing some of its cards in the region in Yemen. The Saudis and the Emiratis are also hesitant because they fear we will target their oil and gas fields, their airports, and other facilities if they join in the invasion of our country. Even the Yemeni mercenaries in southern Yemen are hesitant because they know if they initiated a war, the people from all corners of Yemen, south and north, will mobilize against them, as they will be seen as playing defense for the Zionist entity and playing the role of US mercenaries. Therefore, one can see a clear desire for a ground war from these parties, yet there equally exists some trepidation. However, if the US military failures in Yemen continue, we expect the Saudis and Emiratis to be moved against us and the regional or domestic war to launch. From our end, we have sent a clear message to the Saudi and Emirati leadership that any movement of Yemeni mercenaries in Yemen will be met with a military response deep in Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates. We know the mercenaries that are associated with the Saudis and the Emiratis. If these mercenaries are moved by their handlers in the Gulf, the response will be deep in Saudi and Emirati lands and will take out vital infrastructure targets, whether they be oil and gas fields, power plants, oil refineries, or even airports and ports.
أو مؤسسات للتكرير أو محطات للطاقة أو مطارات وموانئ.
Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth recently said on Fox News that the moment the Houthis stop shooting at U.S. ships, the U.S. military campaign will end. What is the truth there? Was Ansar Allah shooting at U.S. shipping after the ceasefire was declared in Gaza this January?
The American assault on Yemen has been ongoing ever since 2004. First through the internal mercenary groups in Yemen over the course of 6 wars. Then, starting in 2015, using their regional tools like Saudi Arabia and the Emirates and some other Arab countries. All these wars and the brutal blockade have been directed by America and initiated for Israeli and American interests. We never directly engaged the United States, even though we knew it was behind all of these wars and horrors. We never planned to target the U.S. until the U.S. started targeting our naval forces that were engaged in the blockade against the Zionist entity. This first targeting led to the martyrdom of 22 of our soldiers. It was only after this incident that we began targeting U.S. naval ships and naval interests. And we of course stopped all of our operations against the US and the United Kingdom and the Zionist entity altogether when the ceasefire agreement was reached in Gaza. However, the Zionist entity refused to abide by the terms of the ceasefire, they continued to starve the population of Gaza, and they then continued the military and mass murder operations there. In this latest round, our military operations only targeted Israeli shipping and not US military or civilian vessels. We did not target the US until Trump initiated the strikes on Yemen. Therefore, all of our military operations have been defensive. The world must understand that we only consider war a legitimate response in two cases: in cases of self-defense, and in cases where we defend the oppressed, whatever their religion, nationality, or race may be. We don't even believe in preemptive war. Anyone can check our record and confirm that these are truly our principles. For example, we know that the Saudis and Emiratis are preparing their mercenaries in Yemen to blow up the internal fronts in Yemen. Still, we won't resort to preemptive action no matter the possible strategic benefits. The terrorist is the one who commits mass murder and genocide, is the one who blockades millions of people and murders women and children. The one who defends these victims is not a terrorist. All the American accusations that we started a war or hit their ships first are untrue. At any moment that the US stops its aggression on Yemen, we will stop our operations against them, and only continue our operations against the Zionist entity in support of our people in Palestine.
Ansar Allah has downed 20 Mk-9 US Reaper drones since the US military campaign began after October 7th, 2023. You've also been firing ballistic missiles at Israel on a regular basis. How is your military able to carry out and maintain such operations when Yemen is under siege and now under constant bombing and surveillance by the US?
Over almost 10 years, the Yemeni people suffered from Saudi Emirati jets, drones, and Apache helicopters. At the time, we did not have any air defense capabilities. That's why they heavily relied on air support. Therefore, during that period, we started developing our aerial defense capabilities and started downing Apache helicopters. Then we advanced further and started taking down drones and even once took down an F-15 Saudi jet. Everything we used was domestically made. After all, as they say, necessity is the mother of invention. The 10-year blockade and aggression against us made us adapt and become self-reliant. We developed our aerial defense weapons massively. Even Trump admitted in his statements that Yemen has gotten far in terms of its domestic military development. He made this statement based on certified intelligence that he was offered. We are proud of this fact. We don't have an issue as to where the US, the Saudis, the Emiratis, or the Yemenis get their weapons from. Our issue is where these people use their weapons, and whether they use the weapons for immoral acts of mass murder, of genocide, of the murder of women and children. On the other hand, those who use their weapons to protect the victims and the oppressed are truly noble.
The U.S. and its allies in the Gulf say Ansar Allah is an Iranian-backed organization and Iran is responsible for all your actions. How critical is Iranian support to Ansar Allah, especially in this war? And how independent is your government of Iranian influence or control?
What ties us with Iran is a righteous cause for the liberation of Palestine. Conversely, what ties the United States to its regional allies is an unjust cause of maintaining the occupation, exile, and ethnic cleansing of Palestinians. An unjust cause that has robbed Palestinians from their right to live on their own lands. Therefore, our alliance with Iran is a moral, ethical, and humanitarian one. The end goal of this alliance is to support our oppressed people in Palestine. As for our decision, it is fully independent. Everyone confirmed this when we took initiative and supported Gaza with our military blockade without the backing of any other axis of resistance countries. We led in action even considering our limited military and financial capabilities in comparison to some of these other countries and especially Iran.
In recent months, we have seen the destruction of the Syrian state through regime change, and now discussions about Hezbollah joining into the Lebanese armed forces after suffering many losses in its war with Israel. Is the axis of resistance finished, or is it entering a new stage? Will something new come in its place?
The United States has successfully neutralized Syria for the near future thanks to the support of US allies in the region, and especially Turkey. They capitalized on the preoccupation of the axis of resistance with the Zionist entity and the United States, and took the opportunity to dramatically change Syria. As for the weakening of Hezbollah, it is temporary. All Lebanese will soon find out that Hezbollah is the only force capable of protecting the country's sovereignty, and in fact the only force that can liberate the areas taken over by the Zionist entity in the south. The Lebanese people still remember how Hezbollah liberated Lebanon and led to a political settlement in favor of Lebanon. If Hezbollah gives up its weapons, Lebanon will lose its sovereignty and get ransacked by the Zionist entity exactly like what's happening in Syria now. So it is highly improbable and maybe even impossible for Hezbollah to lay down its arms.
There's been much discussion in recent days in U.S. media about an Israeli attack on Iran supported by the United States. And there is a lot of pressure on the president to authorize such an attack. What would be Ansar Allah's response to an attack on Iran, and how do you foresee Iran responding to such an action?
We are already in a state of direct war with the United States and the Zionist entity. If they decide to attack Iran, this means that the battlefield will expand and include other countries like Iraq and some other Gulf countries. This will lessen the burden on Yemen and allow it to deal a large number of blows against both the United States and the Zionist entity or any of the other countries that move in to support them. So we are not worried if the battlefield expands. It will lessen the burden on us. It would also increase our collaboration with Iran and all the other axis of resistance countries that will join the fight. More broadly, we affirm that we will support any country, Arab or Islamic, that is targeted by the Zionist entity or American aggression. Our one condition, though, is that they commit to defending themselves with what they have. Syria today, for example, is getting trampled by the Zionist entity without any retaliation. If the battlefield were to expand, other Arab countries might get targeted. If they don't fight back, we will not stand with them. Yemen will staunchly support any of Egypt, Jordan, Syria, or Lebanon only if they decide to fight back.
Your adversaries in the Gulf region, in Saudi Arabia, the Emirates, they say you've brought destruction and poverty and ruin on the Yemeni people in the name of adventurism, in an attempt to save the Palestinian people from one of the most powerful militaries in the world, and that it would be better if you just accepted reality and worked towards the prosperity of your own people instead of fighting for people somewhere else. What's your response to this, and what does Ansar Allah continue to fight for?
اليمن ضحية
Yemen has been a victim of American policies since 1978. Back then, the United States, in collaboration with the Saudi monarchy, overthrew the government of Ibrahim al-Hamdi. They did so by murdering him, his brother, and many of the leaders in his government. Al-Hamdi was the best ruler in Yemeni history, and they replaced him with the worst ruler of Yemeni history, Ali Abdullah Saleh. With this move, they led to the destruction of the Yemeni economy, they precipitated numerous civil wars, and spread chaos. The United States also directly declared war against us starting in 2004 through their local and regional proxies. Therefore, Yemen has been a victim of American imperialism just like any other Arab, African, South American, or East Asian countries have been victimized by American imperialism. The reason the United States has been capable of wreaking such havoc around the world is because, for the longest time, nations allowed the US empire to unilaterally destroy these countries one by one without any country's intervention. Today, because of our experience with American imperialism, we won't allow the US to isolate its oppression against any country in the world, especially poor and weak ones. On the other hand, considering we live in the age of information and social media, everyone understands that the Palestinian cause is a just one. There are clear laws that protect the human rights that are being infringed upon in Palestine. So how can global Zionism keep depriving the Palestinian people of their rights and their land in this age? They get around that by accusing everyone in the West who dares defend the Palestinians of being an anti-Semite. Similarly, in the Muslim world, any voice or action in support of Palestine is immediately labeled and associated with Iran. And any country that moves in support of Palestine gets targeted and potentially destroyed. This, they hope, will send a message that opposing the Zionist entity will lead to misery. Yet, we loudly proclaim that we are proud to be targets of the United States and the Zionist entity. It must also be stated that the United States has its economic interests intertwined with its perpetual state of war in the Middle East. Every new war allows it to sell weapons and to extort Arab and oil monarchies for protection money. This foreign policy is immoral. Yet this highly immoral policy has been able to target all countries because no one had stood up to the US empire until now. That's why Yemen's decision to resist is a virtuous one that won't only help Palestine but all other countries suffering from the beast of American imperialism. A beast that cares not for the suffering it imposes on the world as long as its interests are maintained.
على هيمنته ويحافظ على مصالحها الاقتصادية.
And finally, Ansar Allah recently hosted a number of international guests for your Palestine conference, including Americans, Jackson Hinkle and Chris Halali, as well as several citizens of Europe, including former EU parliamentarians Claire Daly and Mick Wallace, journalist Pepe Escobar, journalist Steve Sweeney. This generated a lot of attention. What was the message that you were trying to send to the world by hosting these figures from the West? And what is your message now to Americans now that their government is attacking you on the grounds that you are terrorists?
الحرب التي يخوضها الشعب اليمني هي حرب فريدة.
The war that the Yemeni people are waging is a unique one. It has no historical precedent. It is a battle between right and wrong, black and white. The crimes of mass murder and genocide are taking place on air for everyone to see. Therefore, there is no denying that the war we are waging is a moral one that all free people of the world must support. And just like there are Yemeni mercenaries who support the United States and the Zionist entity, there are free Americans who righteously support the Yemeni people as they resist. After all, the war that the Yemeni people are waging has crossed all religious and racial boundaries to become a pure battle between right and wrong. So it is natural for many in the West to sympathize with our position. And we again reiterate that we don't consider ourselves in a state of war against the American people, but rather against the ruling Zionist elite in Washington that has wrought disasters and misery on numerous nations and deprivation on the American people themselves. This is especially true for the American servicemen and women who died on the line of duty in futile and senseless wars like the invasion of Iraq. That's why Yemen welcomes all the free people of the world, because our battle is about morality, and in order to achieve peace, justice, and stability on a global scale, we need to build a new world order that is based on the principles of justice. This noble objective cannot be realized without sacrifices, and above all, the solidarity among the free peoples of the world and the victims of American foreign policy in countries such as Russia, China, Iran, and beyond.
وأيضا حتى الدول المتضررة من السياسات الأمريكية كروسيا والصين وإيران وغيرها.
Mohammed Abul Khaiti, senior political officer and spokesman for the Ansar Allah movement, thank you for joining us again at the Greyzone.
شكرا لكم.
This interview was translated by Hekmat Abu Khater.